I keep hearing people say, "I saved a few bucks on a cheap welder and it barely lasted a month." It's a familiar story. Spend a fraction on a budget-friendly unit, then watch it sputter when you actually need it for a job that's not just a hobby project. That regret makes the decision feel way more risky, especially when the metal you're working with is thick enough to need real power and you're juggling both TIG and stick welding. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So the question is, does the Miller Dynasty 300 feel like a smarter buy, or is it just another expensive piece of equipment that will sit idle in the garage? When I first started comparing entry-level welders, I was looking at three main things: how heavy the machine is, whether it can actually handle the material thickness I'm likely to encounter, and if the control layout lets me get a consistent weld without hunting through endless menus. Most of the budget options I saw either tipped the scales at 80 pounds or required you to upgrade the power source just to hit inch plate. That's a deal breaker when you're moving the unit between a home shop and a job site. The Dynasty 300, at 55 pounds, is noticeably lighter, and its AC/DC capability means you can switch between aluminum and steel without swapping machines. It also claims you can weld up to 3/8 inch CH material, which puts it in a sweet spot for hobbyists who occasionally tackle automotive frames or small structural projects. Let's talk about the day-to-day experience. The first thing you notice is the inverter design. Unlike older transformer-based welders, the inverter runs cooler and draws less power from the outlet. In practical terms, that means you can plug the Dynasty 300 into a standard 240-volt garage outlet without tripping a breaker, even when you're running a steady 200-amp stick weld. I've run a few test pieces: thin stainless for a kitchen hood and a thicker mild steel bracket for a bike frame, and the machine didn't falter. The power stays steady, and the arc length feels predictable, which is a huge confidence booster when you're learning to fine-tune TIG settings. One of the more subtle but handy features is the on-screen guidance for setup and parameters. When you power up, the display walks you through selecting the right mode, TIG or stick, the material type, and the thickness. It even suggests a starting amperage. For someone who's not a welding engineer, that guidance cuts down the trial-and-error phase dramatically. It's not a substitute for learning the fundamentals, but it prevents the frustration of starting a weld only to realize the arc is too weak or the heat input is off. The ability to name, save, and recall favorite weld settings is another time saver. I set up a thin aluminum profile and a heavy steel profile, saved them, and can switch between the two with a couple of button presses. It feels like the machine remembers what you need, rather than forcing you to re-enter numbers every time. Now, who should actually consider the Dynasty 300? If you're a serious hobbyist or a small shop owner who needs a versatile unit that can handle both TIG and stick without buying two separate machines, this is a solid candidate. It's also a good fit for mobile welders who need to transport equipment between job sites. Its 55-pound weight is manageable on a small trailer, and the inverter's lower power draw means you're less likely to need a dedicated generator. The fact that it can handle 3/8 inch CH material opens the door to occasional structural work, not just decorative projects. On the other hand, if your primary work is heavy industrial fabrication that routinely involves inch or thicker plate, you'll quickly find the 3/8 inch CH limit restrictive. Likewise, if you're looking for a pure TIG machine that pushes the envelope on pulse control and advanced waveform shaping, you might be better served by a higher-end Miller model or a dedicated TIG unit. The Dynasty 300 is a combination machine, which is great for flexibility but means it won't have the niche-specific refinements of a specialist welder. What about the downsides? The first practical limitation is the input voltage requirement. While it runs on a 240-volt outlet, you'll still need a proper circuit, something a typical 120-volt home outlet can't provide. That's not a surprise for a machine of this power, but it does mean you can't just plug it into a standard kitchen outlet if you're working in a cramped space. Another point worth mentioning is the learning curve around the dual-mode interface. The machine does a decent job of prompting you, but if you jump straight into TIG on aluminum without first mastering stick settings, you might end up with a lot of wasted filler rod. The screen is functional, but the resolution isn't as crisp as some newer units, so reading small numbers in bright shop lighting can be a little fiddly. The real value of the Dynasty 300 comes from where those specifications translate into everyday savings. Because the inverter is energy efficient, you'll see a lower electricity bill compared to running a transformer-based welder.